Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Health Center. I'm Lorraine Brooks, and I'll be your host for today's show. Today is a very exciting day here at Downstate Medical Center, and one of the reasons is because we are celebrating or acknowledging Diabetes Awareness Month. And part of what we're doing in order to bring attention to the disease of diabetes and to educate people on how to care for themselves and how to take care of this disease that can be so devastating for people, especially in our community. But we here at Downstate are doing our part to make life with diabetes a little bit easier for those people who have to deal with it on a daily basis, myself being one of them. And one of the things we're doing today is a wonderful project called the Plate Poetry Project. And that sounds like, it sounds very esoteric, but what it is actually a display of plates you'll see on the table here in front of us. And it was conceived by a graphic artist who is going to be the guest on today's show. Her name is Susan McCaslin. She's the person who came up with this concept, and I'm going to ask her to explain it to us, and we'll talk a little bit about what this means for the diabetic community. Susan, thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
I was explaining to everyone that we're sitting at a table here in the middle of our, what we call the atrium, which is a very public area here. And we've set up a table, or you've set up a table, and each one of these plates have different words and phrases on them. I wonder if you could explain to us what this is about and how you came up with the idea of plate poetry.
Sure, I'd love to. Well, you know, I've worked with Max Zadak of divabetic.org for a long time. And Max called me one day and said, is there any way we could come up with some kind of an idea that would be a combination of art and health that we could propose for a grant? So I came up with the idea of doing a word per plate and writing a poetic phrases with it. Well, Max did not get that grant, but that didn't stop us. We've been making this project now going, like we get more and more plates going on. So aside from the plates that I was doing that were one plate at a time, like you remember the plate from the last show that I was on, where I had the word hope or the word quiet on one. Well, Max got this wonderful donation from Oneida, which are these plates, and they were so beautiful and so inspiring and so formal compared to what I was doing before, which was basically buying plates at Goodwill, that I thought, well, if I could come up with phrases that could be laid out on these plates. So, for example, the one you were holding up says you. Underneath it says always. This next one says help me. The one underneath says when I, and the last one says need it the most. So you always help me when I need it the most. And I thought that that would be inspirational for people and to really get the idea of sitting at a table and having memories or things that you say to people about how you feel about yourself and the food that you're eating. So a lot of these feelings that we have come from basic family events, starting when we're small children. And do we bring that to the table with us? Do we bring positive things to the table? Do we bring negative? For example, that one, you always help me when I need it the most, would probably be more about a partnership with someone who, and in some of the workshops I've done with Max, people have talked about how important support is for them. And usually it is a partner that's giving them support with their diabetes, how to deal with it. So I also added some that were a little bit less helpful. For example, one over there says, how dare you step on my dreams? And that personally came from the type of family I came from, where you weren't really, the dinner table was more about talking about your parents than it was about your own ideas, and they were very disciplined and very much in control. And so for me, sitting at the table has a lot to do with that feeling of guilt or that feeling of repression.
You know, it's interesting, the whole concept of food, family, nutrition, health, perception, culture, and the fact that we're sitting at this lovely set table really speaks to all of those things. In my family, we grew up where we always sat at the table for dinner. We did not watch television. We did not have video games or anything else going on. Well, there were no video games, but we didn't have anything else going on. We sat at the table as a family, and we had dinner and spoke about what we were doing, what was happening in school, what was happening in the world. But it was all, it revolved around food and the act of eating, and that was our family time.
Right.
Now, I can see it was a positive experience for me, but I can understand how, especially nowadays, where that family time and that food time and that meal time doesn't exist for a lot of people. And so for some people, if you struggle with an illness such as diabetes, where food is such an important part of how you take care of it, that if you don't have that positive background, or you don't have a positive way of looking at food or the act of eating, that could really impact on your ability to control your disease or to deal with your disease. It doesn't have to be diabetes, it can be anything.
Yes, yes. I think it does have an impact, and I think that as having raised 3 children and trying to keep that same idea of having dinner every night together, with a husband that would come commuting, and he would often not get home till 8 o'clock at night. And do you keep the kids awake so that you can all eat together? And you tend not to do that, and the stresses that are involved. If you're also working, then to come home and to prepare a meal with joy and calm, present it to 5 people who are not necessarily all there at the same time. How do you keep that going and without creating negatives around food? And I think it's a very difficult thing, and I think that's why this project to me is great, because it's saying, I need to address this, I need to investigate this, without it being something that would bring up guilt or I don't know how I'm trying to say that.
Well, let me ask you a question. You mentioned an important word, I think, guilt.
Mm-hmm.
Why is there guilt attached to food? What do you think that's about?
Well, I think that there are a lot of people that, in raising children, they think they're doing a good job by encouraging their children to not eat as much as they are. I mean, some of us have trouble with weight from early childhood, and it's to be told as a child, you got to stop eating, is going to go through with you for the rest of your life. And so when you sit at the table, you're going to feel guilty because your mother might have very innocently made comments to you and not realize that she wasn't helping you, she was hurting you. So if we can look at something like that, then we can stop that cycle ourselves from doing it with our own children and from doing it to ourselves every time we sit down. Just stop feeling guilty every time you sit down to eat something.
You know, it's funny you say that, because I was having this conversation just the other day with someone who said, here's the scenario. I turned 60 a few years ago. And here's where you say, I know you don't look it.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, say that.
I can't believe it.
I turned 60 a couple of years ago, and at my own 60th birthday party, I did not have a piece of my birthday cake. And I was telling this to a friend of mine. I said, I had this big party, and there was all this food, and there was a wonderful chocolate cake, and I'm a chocolate fiend. It has to be chocolate, or I'm not even interested. But I did not have a slice of my own birthday cake. And this person said to me, why? And I said, well, because I have diabetes, and that's not really a great idea. She said, well, that's ridiculous. It was your birthday. It was a big birthday for you. I said, well, it wasn't ridiculous in my mind because my body doesn't know what day it is.
Right.
My body doesn't know what day it is on the calendar, so my body's not going to say, okay, let's give her a break, it's her birthday. So I did not have a slice of my own birthday cake, and she was appalled. She said, you're being ridiculous. You can't live the rest of your life without ever having a slice of birthday cake. It's just totally ridiculous. But I think it was because of what you're talking about. It was that sense of, it wasn't exactly guilt. It was like, why would I do that?
Yeah.
It just didn't make sense to me. But she said just totally the opposite. She was saying to me, you have to moderate yourself. It's not that you have to give up for the rest of your life ever having another slice of chocolate cake. You can have a little bit, you can enjoy it a little bit, but it's this whole sense of, no, I can't do that. that makes people crazy. It made me crazy.
Well, the thing, and in that story, what I take from that is she really was making you wrong for making a very important decision in your life.
Why do you say that?
Well, because I would, if it were me, I would have preferred she'd say, I'm so impressed how disciplined you are that on your own birthday you're not going to eat cake, and I wish I were as disciplined as you are. It's important to support people when they are struggling with something or trying something new, and when you get messages from them that they're trying something new, I think you need to pick up on those and support them for that.
So then this could go either way.
Yeah.
This guilt thing,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
It could be a positive message or a negative
Yes,
message.
yes, yes. I mean, I'm sure she is a good friend of yours, and she wanted to watch you enjoying your birthday, and I'm sure it came out of great love that she was saying that for you. But what people say out of great love, we also will reinterpret in our own needs. So for me, coming from a family that would be very critical of my decisions, I was hearing in that story that this woman was being critical of you, and you weren't hearing that. So that's really what is important. But
Well, I kind of did hear it in the beginning as criticism, but then when I thought about it, I thought, yes, she was, of course, trying to help me because I was depriving myself, or she
Yeah.
perceived that I was depriving myself for no really good reason. There wasn't a good reason for me to deprive myself. It was my birthday. It was a special occasion. I don't do it all the time, So in her mind, it was the deprivation or the lack that was causing the problem, not the piece of cake. And in reality, of course, that's true.
yes,
And I
yes.
think that's one of the messages that we try and send to people, and maybe one of the things that we're going to be talking about as we interact with people and their own feelings about food.
Yes, yes.
Is that it isn't all or nothing.
No.
That there's some gray area in between that we have to strive to get that balance. Do you
And
agree
I
with
think
that?
there's no all or nothing, and if we know ourselves well enough, then other people's comments and other people's feelings won't become criticism, or we won't hear them as criticism. And that's why I like this project, because it's about picking out a plate that you respond to and thinking, why do I respond to that plate? Like if you picked out the plate teach, well, why would you have chosen that plate? And to really think about it a little bit, about where that comes from. So, for example, one of the plates that I put on here was join, and that was just an immediate reaction, and I had to think, now, why would I have put join and thought of that in the same aspect with celebrate? But it's really about coming to it. This table is a joyful table, and joyful tables are about community, and if you join community, you will also you'll get strengthened by the community. So that's how I see that, the same as celebrate.
And join also, I mean, when you're struggling with a disease such as diabetes, I think it's important for you to join with other people.
Yes.
For you to, we always talk about having a healthcare team. And the team, of course, has to include not just healthcare professionals, but it has to include other people who are struggling the way you are, or who are, I shouldn't use the word struggling, but who are dealing with the
Yes.
same issues that you're
Yes.
dealing with. So I think this join can have a lot of positive ramifications
Yes.
when we're talking about people's health.
Yes.
And we're here in a major medical center. We have support groups that we run here for people with all kinds of diseases: cancer, breast cancer, prostate cancer, diabetes, AIDS, all kinds of things. And it's important to join
Yes.
with the community and to feel like you're a part of something
Yes.
bigger than yourself. But let's get back to the plate poetry for a second.
Okay.
You say that this is a happy table, a celebratory table, but yet you have a couple of place settings where the messages are not quite so positive.
Well, as I say, it's happy. It's also very formal, and I feel like sometimes formality can hide some feelings that people are having. Or sometimes when we come to the table with at a holiday, and there are feelings that people are having, that uncle that you've never really liked is sitting across from you, and so you're dealing with that, and you're dealing with old issues. So that's why I included some negative ones, because I thought it was important to have that.
These are sort of conversations, as you explained to me yesterday, that the plates read kind of as dinner conversations. So, for
Yes.
example, I just want to show this one says, you, and we already showed this, always help me when I need it most. This one says something very different. This one says, so tough when I hear you cry at night. Why that?
Well, that could be all kinds of relationships. That could be a mother and a child. It could be a child and a mother. If it were a family where if you think about an abusive family and children take responsibility for the abused parent, it could have something to do with that. It could be a couple's relationship. It could be partner relationship. And it's about not having, you feel helpless. When somebody is crying at night, there's a reason why you're not able to stop their crying and you want to help them. So it's about that joining of some sort of a relationship where, I relate it to being a mother and having children that cry at night that are no longer crying just because they're hungry. They're crying because someone said something cruel to them at school. And it's very sad. You want to stop the person you love from feeling that pain. And you can't always do that.
And sometimes that pain is about food-related issues.
Yes, definitely. I mean, with the mother and child, it could be about a child that's being teased at school. And the being teased doesn't necessarily have to do with any reality, because children tease each other or bully each other terribly. But it could be at the table that maybe you would be talking to them about that. Dinner time is a good time to have those conversations. So it surrounds food. And it gets so complex. These ideas of what happens at the table can be so complex, and it can go flipping back and forth from positive to negative, that it's really hard to do anything except hopefully take it in yourself and relate to it and see how your life is affected by that, and what you can do to at least not bring food into the issue.
Even though these conversations are being had at a meal.
Yes.
So sometimes the meal, now Thanksgiving is coming.
Yes.
And Thanksgiving is one of those holidays where families get together.
Yes.
Ostensibly to celebrate. I say ostensibly because some families, there are difficulties and, as you say, difficult relationships, and people that maybe you only see once a year on Thanksgiving.
Yes.
And the idea is to get together and be thankful for the meal and for the family and for the blessings that we all have. But for some people, that's a double-edged sword. For some people, that very meal and that very getting together is fraught with all kinds of things. Not only is the food very abundant and probably way too much than any of us ought to be eating, and any of us, regardless of what we struggle with, and we see Thanksgiving as a kind of a holiday of gluttony. It's like it's the one day when it's okay for you to eat anything you want in as much quantity as you want, and then you sleep it off the next day, and that's okay. But it's also a holiday where sometimes there are difficulties in families, and people struggle with whether or not they want to even be with their families on that day, or even be thankful for the gift of family when there are so many struggles and so many things involved. So the meal at Thanksgiving really kind of symbolizes everything that you're talking about.
It really does. And the same meal, if you don't have family and you're going to friends' houses. I mean, there are a lot of people who don't have families. They gather together purposely because none of them have families, and they come up with really nice phrases about what kind of a Thanksgiving that is. It's sort of the outliers Thanksgiving, or
I haven't heard that one.
and they, it's a very joyful thing. I think sometimes because those people are not bringing old histories with them together, those are really truly the meaning of a Thanksgiving dinner. And if if it is family and there are issues, if you know what some of those issues are and you are ready for them, and ready also to decide that Thanksgiving is not the day to deal with those issues, I think that the dinner table on that day can be much more joyful than it might end up being if you decide to deal with any of those issues. But it's true. I mean, Thanksgiving, I find it's, not only is it about gluttony, because it really is. I mean, we are all showing off and we're bringing more food and we end up with more food than we can possibly need. It's also about that relationship, and hopefully you can keep that, well, I don't know, it's kind of a, it's a mixed bag. It's a mixed
bag.
blessing, really.
Exactly.
I mean, it's wonderful that you have family to get together, and it's great when that family can
Support you.
Yes, be very supportive, yeah.
Some people, now I'm the only person in my family, I'm going to just relate this to me personally. I'm the only person in my family who has diabetes, the only one. And I don't know that people understand what that really means, you know, and I can say that it's kind of, I think I have sort of diabetes explanation burnout, you know, I'll say that. It's a case of me having to, or often feeling like I need to explain to people why I'm making the choices that I am, or why I'm avoiding the things that I am. And it's very difficult for people to understand that, just like my friend with my birthday cake. It's very difficult for people to understand why I'm not having the stuffing and I'm not having the baked potato, or I'm having the stuffing or the baked potato, not both, or whatever it is. And I have to explain it, or I feel like I have to explain it. Maybe I don't. Maybe I really don't have to explain it. You know, that just occurred to me. But I feel like I do. I feel like somehow people are, even without saying the words, they're sort of at, you know, they look at your plate and they're like, "You're not having any stuffing?" No, thank you. You know, but they don't let it go there. It's like, well, you gotta have stuffing. Goes with the turkey.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
Well, maybe I don't want stuffing, and I don't know if that. I don't know if that would be a question if I didn't have diabetes, because I don't hear anyone else being asked about whether or not they're having stuffing. On the other hand, maybe they really are, and I'm the only one
But I think if you listen,
not,
the person
you know.
who's questioning you like that is probably, if you start paying attention, probably doing the same thing but in another way to every other relative at the.
I'm going to pay attention.
I mean, there's
this
always
year
that.
now. That's
There's
whole
always the uncle. To me, I say it's the uncle because I happen to have one of those uncles that felt he had every right to point out things to you
negative things.
Well, negative, or just to tease you, or, you know, I mean, when you're 8, to tease you about your glasses, or when you're 12, to tease you about, do you have a boyfriend yet? Or, as you're saying, if you have diabetes, saying, why aren't you having, you know, my wife's potatoes, and sort of thing. And it really kind of all comes down to power play and places, the position in the family that some people have. And I think if you can sort of be prepared for that and watch to see who it is, either you can be prepared and have an answer, or you can just take joy in the fact that this is what families do, that there's always one of those people. And sometimes, I mean, I ask a lot of questions. Like I was asking Arthur, who's here working with us today, about why he doesn't eat certain foods. And I had to keep asking, you mean you don't have this? You mean you can't eat that? You mean, and it was because I didn't understand it, and I want to understand it. But I would think for you with diabetes, it might get sort of old that people keep asking you this.
It does. It gets kind of old, and it gets kind of frustrating. And I'm not sure, you know, as I'm saying this to you out loud now, this is a new strategy. I'm actually going to try that on Thanksgiving, because somehow it is maybe a touch of guilt. I hate that word.
Yeah.
But maybe it is a touch of guilt that I feel somehow I need to explain this. It's not a case of, you know, freedom of choice, or I, you know, prefer this over that, turnips over carrots or whatever. It's not quite that simple. It's somehow that there's this unwritten thing that we have to explain ourselves.
Yes.
You know, and it could be cultural as well, because certain families have certain traditional dishes on Thanksgiving that are usually very calorie laden, or carbohydrate laden, or sugar laden, candied yams and those kinds of things, sweet potatoes. And so it could be partly cultural, as you say. You know, how can
Yeah.
you not eat the candied yams? This is our family's, recipe that's been brought down from generations. You
know.
can't not have that.
You can't just take a
And you
bite?
can't just, right, right.
Yeah.
And you can't just take a bite. You have to have a
Right.
whole serving of it. You can't just, take
I
dribs
know.
and drabs
I
of it.
know.
So I think that part of it, yes, is cultural. Part of it is familial. Part of it is feeling different, that I'm not like everybody else, that I have to calculate and count and make allowances for.
Yep.
It's not that I can't do it, but if I have the sweet potatoes and the mashed potatoes and the stuffing and the roll and I've got to make certain allowances in my world in order
Yes.
for that to happen. You don't have to do that.
I know, and I stopped eating sugar for about 3 months, a few months ago. I was very successful. It was great. Felt wonderful. Every time I went to visit my mother's house, the first thing she'd ask me is, "You want some candy?" And I
Did she know
realized,
you were
yes,
trying not to eat
and
sugar?
I realized that for her, when I said I'm not eating sugar, I think she might be turning it around to, "Oh, she's eating a lot of sugar." It just the idea. And she had this idea of sugar in her head, and that brought her to say, "Would you like some candy?" And it took me a while to realize she wasn't trying to sabotage me. She was hearing me, but she was hearing only the word sugar. So when she just would hand me sugar every time I saw her, and I had to say, "No, I'm not eating sugar right
Okay.
now. Thank you very much." But it was really hard because I really wanted to just lash out at her.
We have to wrap it up, and it's been such a wonderful
Oh, this has been
conversation
an
with you.
incredible experience.
I just want to tell everyone that if they ever see the Plate Poetry Project or the Plate Poetry Workshop or divabetic.org or Susan McCaslin, to please stop and take a look at all the wonderful things that she's doing. If you're a person who's dealing with diabetes and Thanksgiving is coming, or any big holiday where there's a big meal going to be served, I think we can take Susan's advice, and that is not to take it so seriously and try to understand that people are really trying to help and trying to be supportive. And be supportive of yourself and speak your own truth. And I think that's the best advice that we can give anybody. Susan, thank you again for being on the show, and thank you for watching Health Center.